two venerable black veterans settled in for a tranquil morning meal. Their voices remained even, their composure unyielding. Yet their simple presence within moments ignited a national dialogue. What transpired next will profoundly resonate. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness transcends mere narrative. It stands as a potent testament to the subtle strength and persistent pursuit of equity in overlooked corners. If you're new here, I warmly invite you to share your viewing location in the comments below. And if narratives like this stir you, provoke thought, or challenge your perspective, please consider subscribing and activating the bell icon. We amplify deserving voices daily. Thank you for joining us. Now let's delve into the story. Nestled beneath the gentle gleam of dawn and the reassuring murmur of a bustling diner, a moment exists, so commonplace it verges on invisible. This is precisely where our tale commences. Two seasoned souls, veterans whose hearts have witnessed both valor and sorrow, sit quietly in a modest town diner, just off Interstate 5 near Santa Rosa, California. They seek not attention, but solace in shared remembrance of burdens borne, and camaraderie that defies the passage of years and the shadow of conflict. Walter "Walt" Thompson, a retired Army infantry sergeant, eases into his customary booth with the deliberate grace of one who has lived far beyond his 72 years. His bearing, though still strong, is now softened by time's relentless march. Across from him sits Marcus "Mark" Hayes, an ex-Marine Corps medic whose hands once preserved lives amidst the chaos of Kandahar. Mark's face bears the tender etchings of one who has seen too much, yet cares too deeply for bitterness to take root. Between them, the table holds a humble spread: 2 cups of black coffee, no sugar, 2 plates laden with scrambled eggs and bacon, and the clear evidence of a ritual faithfully observed twice a month for the past decade. On this particular morning, the diner's soft hum envelopes them like a comforting shroud. The mingled scents of fresh toast and sizzling bacon drift through the air. Behind the counter, Eva Martinez, the diner's manager and a long-standing friend to many who frequent these doors, slides another pot of coffee into a warmer. Her gaze catches Walt's, offering a nod that speaks volumes of unspoken routines and a shared familiarity spanning decades. But beneath the placid surface, a subtle unease begins to stir. One can sense the escalating tension before it strikes, like the stillness preceding a summer tempest. Neither Walt nor Mark quickens their movements. They don't flinch or glance around. Yet both sense the fragility of this morning's calm, aware it could shatter with the slightest disruption. That disturbance arrives in the form of footsteps. Firm, purposeful, devoid of warmth. Deputy Claire Robertson enters the diner with the quiet force of authority. Her uniform is immaculate, her demeanor cool. She offers no greeting to anyone. Instead, she surveys the room, her eyes briefly meeting Walt and Mark's, lingering for just a fraction longer than usual. There is a calculated precision in her approach to their booth, as if her steps delineate a boundary visible only to her. Eva looks up from her station behind the counter, pausing momentarily with a concerned furrow in her brow. Mark subtly shifts in his seat, silently lifting his coffee cup to defer the moment, refusing to betray the hint of apprehension she might be seeking. When Claire reaches them, time seems to almost crawl. She leans in ever so slightly and poses a question so mundane it reverberates like glass breaking in a cathedral. "May I see your identification, gentlemen?" Her voice carries authority, but the manner in which it lands between Walt and Mark suggests a challenge rather than a simple inquiry. Walt calmly places a veteran's ID card on the table, always steady, never perturbed. Mark mirrors his action. They offer no explanation, no challenge to her reasoning. They remain quiet, resolute. It is an implicit refusal to yield to an unarticulated threat. In that moment, Walt's eyes lock with Claire's with a tranquility that cuts deeper than any blade. Mark's gaze remains unwavering. The diner holds its collective breath. A few feet away from the corner of her eye, Eva witnesses this silent exchange. There's relief in her posture, yet also a flicker of worry. The men she knows are holding their ground, and that disrupts the peace she strives to cultivate. Others in the cafe observe in hushed silence. Some glance down at their phones. Others pause, mugs suspended mid-sip. The palpable curiosity hangs in the air like electricity. There's no shouting, no flamboyant confrontation. No one rushes to intervene. Only stillness. Claire's gaze flickers, striving to reconcile her expectations with the reality before her. Two senior citizens, two veterans, composed and collected, refusing to be rattled. She clears her throat and repeats herself with measured calm, as if expecting immediate compliance. Your identification, please. Walt inclines his head, but makes no move to hand over the card. He simply waits. This subtle shift, refusing to surrender the card while keeping it clearly visible, is small but potent. It compels Claire to deviate from her script, beyond the convenience of unchecked authority, into the messy realm of accountability. The tension deepens. The siren of prejudice is soft but insistent. And now it vibrates beneath every word exchanged and every glance cast. It permeates every line. Gentlemen of a certain age. Black men, veterans, a diner, suspicion. In that moment they embody everything the system expects to dismiss, yet refuses to. What began as a quiet morning ritual now hangs suspended between dignity and distrust, remembrance and heartbreak, duty and defiance, sorrow and significance. It is all here on the small wooden table set against cracked linoleum floors and the hum of late-morning patrons. One can feel the decades of sacrifice and service interwoven into aged bones and scarred hands. One can smell the hot brew, the vinyl booths, the heat of unspoken tension coiled between polite words. But here's the crucial point, that tension is not theirs. Not truly. It belongs to America. It is ancient, woven into the very fabric of who we are and how we perceive one another. Walt and Mark are simply choosing not to let it eclipse the moment. They are choosing to remain steady, present, in a place where they should feel welcome. That choice, in the face of quiet suspicion, elevates the morning from ordinary to unforgettable. It becomes a mirror, reflecting every unacknowledged prejudice, every buried memory, every silent fear. It becomes a summons to see, to listen, to confront. And this is merely the beginning. Soon, this quiet breakfast will transcend a morning meal. It will ripple through conversations, quiet diners, living rooms, social media feeds. It will demand attention, prompting people to consider their stance. But for now, it is simply two elderly veterans enjoying their coffee and a deputy challenging them with a glance. That's how it commences. Not with shouting or chaos, but with a serene, ordinary morning shattered by a single question. May I see your identification? We stand on the precipice of something momentous, and all it will take is a second more. The morning sunlight filtered through floral curtains into Millie's diner, but the atmosphere was dense with tension. A weight that pressed down not just on the two veterans at the booth but on everyone in the room. Deputy Claire Robertson stood a few steps back from her initial entrance point, her body rigid, her gaze fixed on Walt Thompson and Marcus Hayes. The badge on her chest, meant to signify honor, service and justice, felt to those veterans like a barrier rather than a safeguard. Years earlier, Walt had worn a similar emblem, stars and bars, not a deputy's shield, on his fatigues while patrolling dusty roads. He had believed in the integrity of that symbol. Now, across the diner, Claire wore hers as if it were armor, not an emblem of accountability. She cleared her throat, drawing soft glances from tables of coffee sippers and plate clatterers. Gentlemen, she began again, her voice measured, but her eyes conveyed a challenge. Please hand over your identification. Walt met her gaze, his voice low and steady. Our IDs are here, he said, tapping the veteran cards they'd respectfully placed on the table. They're visible. Claire paused, absorbing his calm assertion. The flicker in her expression betrayed an internal struggle within her badge, within her protocol. A tug-of-war between the letter of the law and the impulse of unchecked power. She took a small step forward. I reserve the right to verify you are who you say you are. Mark leaned forward, his voice firm yet respectful. You already know who we are. We come here every 2 weeks. Eva's seen us before. Ask her. He gestured discreetly toward the counter where Eva Martinez hovered, not out of interference but concern. Claire's jaw tightened and she turned to face Eva, who stood behind the coffee pot. Miss, these gentlemen refuse to identify themselves. Eva placed her hand gently on her apron and held Claire's gaze. They showed me their veterans' IDs, she said calmly, and they never hid them. They pay for every coffee, every meal. I know them. They're part of this community. From another booth, a murmured acknowledgement traveled. Yeah, they're regulars. But the deputy didn't look over. Claire sighed, her jaw working. Knowing them isn't the issue. It's my responsibility. Walt let out a quiet breath as if recalling far-off places. It's our responsibility to live with dignity, he replied. We've already shown yours. Claire stiffened. She lifted her radio, keying it. The shrill tone hummed, catching attention. Dispatch, verify IDs for Deputy Robertson. 2 males, black, veteran IDs shown, refusal to surrender IDs. She kept her eyes fixed on Walt and Mark as she waited for a response. Walt looked down at the ID card in front of him. This was no patrol base in Kandahar. No firefights or ambushes. These buildings weren't scarred by war. But the badge now felt heavier than any rifle. How far are we going to let this go? He murmured under his breath, the tension tightening his chest. Claire drew in a slow breath. I'm following protocol, she said, but her voice held the strain of uncertainty, a faint tremor slipping through the cracks in her tone. Mark folded his arms. That protocol makes veterans sitting in a diner suspects. That's not justice, Deputy. Claire's eyes flickered with doubt. She knew she was on guard, but instinct felt lodged in a place beyond reason. Walt cleared his throat, channeling all civilian courage into that one moment. Deputy Robertson, respect is earned. You've got our cards. Ask us if you want more, but don't assume guilt. Just then, dispatch crackled through Claire's radio. Deputy Robertson, IDs verified. No outstanding warrants. Clear to disengage. Claire paused, her face a mask. The radio tone echoed. She pressed the end button, her hand shaking so she couldn't tell herself it was nerves or fatigue. He swallowed. No one moved. Not Walt, not Mark, not the people around them. That moment, proof of innocence, hung in the room like rain paused in midair. Claire glanced down at her badge. She had responded to a call, an anonymous tip, presumably to make her feel she had to act. But now the weight of false authority settled like lead on her shoulders. She swallowed again. You're cleared, she said, each syllable slow. Walt quietly finished his coffee, then set the mug down. Thank you. There was no triumph or taunt in his tone, only dignity. Mark reached for his ID card and slipped it into his wallet. Claire stepped back as if released by their restraint. A hush lingered as the deputy slipped away, avoiding eye contact with any patron. Behind the counter, Eva's expression mixed relief and sorrow. They had all witnessed something brewing long before Claire arrived. Walt tapped the tabletop with his knuckles. She had that radio. I thought she was going to escalate. Mark nodded slowly. Years ago I saw a young Marine slapped with a similar situation, different place, same badge, branded fear. I never thought I'd live to see it in our own kitchen. Behind them, the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation returned, but something had changed. That morning routine had been fractured. People had seen a badge misused, and 2 veterans had met that moment not with outrage but with calm strength. Stirring, Eva returned with 2 hot cups, no charge. On the house, she whispered to Walt and Mark. You didn't deserve any of that. Walt sipped the dark coffee. We just come here to be seen, he said quietly. Was that too much to ask? No one spoke. Just the echo of 2 senior men at a diner, served then scrutinized, universal now in its familiarity, yet profound in its rupture. This was larger than protocol. It was the line between service and suspicion, identity and assumption. Claire's badge had led her to stop them not for what they did but for what she thought they might be. In doing so, she reminded every diner that their trust given should not be replaced by fear worn like armor. Walt and Mark rose, finally placing bills for their breakfast, extra for Eva's kindness. She paused, smiling softly as she took them. Outside, the morning sun had grown brighter. It felt sharper now, like it illuminated not only the diner, but the moment when authority crossed into misuse. As Walt and Mark stepped off the cracked sidewalk, side by side, neither spoke, but their presence articulated what words couldn't. We stand. We served. And even when accused, we stay true. They didn't know if Deputy Robertson would reflect on the morning. They didn't know if her badge weighed lighter now. But they carried something with them. A still, quiet conviction born of service, sharpened by confrontation, deepened by memory. Because when a badge crosses the line, it's not the person beneath it who defines its weight. It's the people it confronts who reveal its true value. The air inside Millie's diner had found a fragile equilibrium after the unsettling confrontation. Walt Thompson and Marcus Hayes continued their informal breakfast tradition, testing the limits of their newly reclaimed normalcy. But beneath their steady exterior, something deeper stirred, an invitation to reconsider what respect truly entails, both given and received. Walt looked down at his coffee, dark and bitter, swirling with white cream. It reminded him of the complexities of respect, sometimes easy to blend, sometimes requiring stillness. He cleared his throat, his voice low but determined. "Mark," he began, "we've worn the uniform of this nation. We've carried the weight of its people on foreign soil. But here in our own country, sometimes respect feels like a luxury." He let the words hang for a moment, measured. Marcus leaned back, his fingers tapping the table in a steady rhythm. "Respect is more than protocol," he said. "It's how you treat someone when nobody's watching. It's the conversation you choose not to have and the assumption you refuse to make." Walt nodded, tracing a pattern in the condensation on his mug. "This morning, Deputy Robertson demanded our IDs as if they were proof of anything other than who we already are. She asked us because we looked out of place. But respect doesn't ask for proof of existence. It acknowledges it." Eva Martinez approached with 2 fresh cups, the aroma of coffee offering comfort. She set them down gently, her eyes meeting Walt's. She had seen more than just a tense scene unfold. She had recognized Respect's absence. She spoke softly, her voice carrying warmth. "I've seen you both turn up here morning after morning. And I know what you give to this place. Respect isn't earned by proving nothing. It's given because people matter." Marcus accepted his refill with a nod. "Eva's right," he said. "Respect is the first thing we owe each other. Veteran, civilian, deputy, stranger. All of us deserve that recognition of our humanity." Walt glanced around the room at the scattered patrons, some quietly returning to their meals, others stealing glances. "It goes both ways," he observed. "We can't expect respect only from them if we don't offer it first. That deputy might have been harsh, but she's human. Maybe she's afraid. Maybe she's worked in places where trust was broken. That doesn't excuse her, but it explains her. Respect sometimes means seeing that too." Marcus nodded again. "Humility," he added. "Respect shows up when you lean in and listen. Let's not just expect it. Let's model it." Walt's voice softened with thoughtfulness. "It isn't just an idea. Respect means staying calm when others don't. It means reminding them who you are without raising your voice. Today we spoke with facts and our dignity. Tomorrow we show up the same way. That's respect in action." They both fell silent, letting the weight of their words settle as the diner hummed with resumed life. But this was no return to the status quo. It was a shift grounded in purpose. Eva lingered nearby, nodding in agreement. Marcus cleared his throat. "I was thinking," he said, "about all those kids who watch. They see 2 black veterans being questioned for sitting down. Respect isn't just between adults. It's a lesson for them too." Walt smiled faintly. "Kids like Terrence down the street, he's watching. He'll hear what we did. He'll tell his friends not to shrink when someone places them under a gaze. That's respect shifting from passive to active. It's generational." A soft buzz rose from Bianca's phone at the counter. She'd stayed nearby, filming captured moments not for show but for record. She thumbed through comments that thanked Walt and Marcus for modeling dignity under pressure. "Respect," she observed quietly, felt threaded through every message. Walt added, "Respect also means accountability. When Deputy Robertson isolates us to verify our worth, we respect her right to do her job, but we demand she exercise it honorably. We did that tactfully so everybody saw what respect looks like in tough moments." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, his jaw set. It wasn't about winning, it was about setting a tone. Respect isn't an outcome. It's a standard. You don't negotiate it, you demonstrate it. Eva stepped closer and placed a warm hand on Walt's arm. "You gave the diner more than a peaceful morning. You gave it a foundation. Respect built brick by brick." Walt looked at his cup, silent, digesting the weight of the morning. That might be the most important part. Respect isn't a bridge. It's the bricks themselves. He turned his gaze back to Marcus. "We started something today." They both sat in a calm hush, listening to the diner's quiet resurgence. From the kitchen came the soft clang of a pan. Nearby, a few customers conversed in gentle tones. None of it was loud. None of it was perfect, but all of it spoke. The echoes of respect radiated outward, real, practical, and necessary. Walt finished his coffee, slowly savoring each sip. "Let's be that every day," he said softly. "Respect isn't just about me or her badge. It's about all of us, seen, recognized, treated as human. That's what real respect means." As the morning brightened outside Millie's window, two veterans sat at a humble table with fresh coffee between them. No fanfare, no applause, just calm and conviction. They were veterans of war. But this was a different battlefield, one fought with quiet resolve anchored by respect. And on that battlefield they were already winning. When Deputy Lawson stepped away from the booth, something shifted in Millie's diner, as if the room itself took a breath and began to exhale. Silence held for a moment. Then Lieutenant Carter returned, his uniform slightly rumpled, but his bearing resolute. He approached Walt and Marcus with measured steps, his eyes meeting theirs with sincerity. No cameras followed this entry. It was a private encounter made public only by those who chose to stay and listen. He paused at their table. "Sergeant Thompson, Private Hayes," he began using their military titles. "I've reviewed what happened." Deputy Robertson overstepped. He paused, searching their faces. "I want to apologize on behalf of the department and on my own behalf. You deserved better this morning. You came in for peace. What you got was suspicion, and that was wrong." He kept his voice steady, even soft, a stark contrast to the earlier tension. Walt placed his hand gently on Marcus's arm, signaling that this wasn't just about an apology, it was about connection. Marcus nodded subtly, his gaze fixed on Lieutenant Carter. The diner's familiar hum became a backdrop once more, though now infused with resonance. It was a moment of human reckoning, not just procedural routine. Carter continued, "I've asked Deputy Robertson to step aside while we conduct a full review. That's protocol. But more than that, I'm recommending new community training. Listening, bias recognition, communication. I want your input included if you're willing." His voice carried a humility that felt earned, not performative. Walt unclasped his hands and leaned forward slightly. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice warm yet unyielding. "We appreciate your apology and we accept it. But we came here not for apologies. We came for awareness. We came to remind folks that respect, humanity, dignity, those aren't earned at the bottom of a gun belt. They're inherent." Carter nodded, eyes moist. Marcus offered a quietly impactful smile. "You said you want our input," Marcus continued. "Fine. Start by listening to people before you approach them. Don't assume they're suspicious. Assume they're human." His words hung in the air with clarity. Walt added, "And don't just offer training, model it. We volunteered for service overseas even when nobody was watching. We did it out of duty and love for this country. Treating folks with dignity isn't a lesson, it's a covenant. Help your deputies remember that they're citizens first. Enforcers second." Lieutenant Carter rested his hand on the table, sincerity etched on his face. "That's exactly what I want. A covenant between the badge and the people it serves. I don't have all the answers, but I know this. If we don't start rebuilding that trust, policy won't matter. It has to come from hearts. Will you help me?" Marcus reached across and shook Carter's hand. "Yes," he said. "We'll help you, but we'll hold you to it." Walt offered his hand next. "We'll help you stay honest." The room seemed to brighten, not in light but in promise. Jolene passed by, setting down a pitcher of water. She met their eyes and smiled softly. She didn't need words. Her gesture said, "Thank you for staying, for helping." Around them, other patrons watched with gentle approval, some wiping quiet tears from eyes hardened by routine. Here was accountability embodied, apology rooted in action. Carter straightened and looked across the diner. "I'll schedule a community session at the rec center," he declared. Not a proclamation but a statement of intent. "All citizens invited, all voices heard, and we'll start with you too." The confidence in his tone wasn't bravado. It was resolve. Walt exhaled, the tension lifting from his shoulders. "That's how change happens," he told Marcus when Carter moved on. "Not in reports but in conversations, sometimes difficult conversations between people who refuse to stay silent." Marcus nodded, scanning the diner. A few tables over, a young black mother leaned down to her child, explaining what dignity looked like. A white farmer waved in their direction as Carter left. At the counter, Bianca kept filming, not with sensationalism, but to archive a story of real transformation. A moment passed before Jolene leaned in and spoke. "You fellas want something to eat on the house today?" Her voice trembled slightly. "I meant it when I said y'all earned it." Walt smiled and accepted a fresh breakfast plate. Marcus nodded his thanks. In that simple act, the apology echoed. They had not only been forgiven, they had been welcomed again. Bianca stood and walked out to the dining room's entrance where Carter had spoken. He caught his eye. He nodded and she mouthed, "Thank you." He offered a small nod back. Moments earlier he had stood behind a badge. Now he stood beside a mission. Outside, daylight seeped into the street. A new morning not just for Walt and Marcus, but for the diners of this small town, and for every story that noticed this one. Within those walls, an apology had become an awakening, and a promise had been made tangible. The ripple of that morning would travel beyond breakfast. It might spread through training rooms, civic meetings, school assemblies. But the real change began here. Broken trust recognized, accountability accepted, voices invited. That was the awakening. And as Walt and Marcus finished their second plate, sipped their water, they knew their service hadn't ended when they left the battlefield. It was just changing terrain. They had stepped into a peaceful morning and turned it into a bridge. A bridge between fear and understanding, between suspicion and respect, between a badge and the people it served. And that bridge began with an apology and with waking up. Morning sunshine spilled through the window of Millie's diner, but it carried with it more than warmth. It carried the electricity of change. Sergeant Walt Thompson and Private Marcus Hayes sat in their booth side by side, watching the news. Their story had gone national. On screen, anchors discussed the viral video of two black veterans who refused intimidation, reminding a town and a country what true service and dignity look like. But the real story didn't unfold under studio lights. It played out in everyday moments. The postal carrier who stopped by to thank them personally, the neighbors who shared their breakfast table, the high school student who wrote an essay about what respect should look like. Walt and Marcus learned that what had started as a quiet morning in a small diner had blossomed into a movement that reached far beyond the counter and the coffee cups. Lieutenant Carter reappeared in the diner mid-morning, this time without a badge or uniform, just a man committed to follow through. In his hand he held a stack of invitation flyers for a community listening session at the local recreation center. He looked evenly at Walt and Marcus. "I've kept my word," he said. "Now we need your voice to shape what comes next." Marcus reached out, taking the flyers. Walt smiled softly. "We'll be there," he said, not to complain anymore but to build. Nearby, Jolene placed fresh blueberry muffins on their table, on the house. "For the steering committee, right?" she teased. They both laughed but felt her sincerity. "Absolutely," Marcus replied. "And thank you for everything." She nodded, tears catching in her eyes. It was more than generosity. It was a silent pledge of solidarity. That afternoon a line formed outside the rec center. Diverse faces, young and old, black and white and brown, gathered to speak and to listen. Walt and Marcus guided the discussion, gently steering dialogue away from blame and toward practical solutions. Community bias training, ride-alongs with veterans, check-ins after traffic stops. As the session ended, a local journalist approached. "Your morning sparked national discussion. What do you hope comes next?" Walt looked across the room at neighbors who had taken that next step. "I hope this reminds America that respect is contagious and courage starts with small acts." Marcus added, "If two old soldiers eating breakfast can change hearts and policies, imagine what families and young communities can do too." Later that evening, Walt and Marcus returned to the diner, now closed for the day. They sat in their booth with coffee, the quiet hum of the world outside softened by dusk. Marcus gazed at the empty seats. "Crazy to think 1,000 voices responded, didn't you?" he said. Walt nodded. "All because someone chose not to be silent." They talked quietly about the next day. Meetings with the mayor, curriculum ideas for the high school, even a charity run in honor of veterans. It wasn't spectacle. It was foundation building rooted in dignity and respect. By midnight the diner sign still flickered over Highway 41. But now it shone for more than bacon and eggs. It signaled possibility, compassion and unity, an ordinary place that had birthed an extraordinary ripple. Walt and Marcus left at last, stepping into the calm Tennessee evening. They walked away knowing they had fed more than empty stomachs. They had nourished change. A peaceful morning, a powerful ripple, a nation awakened. And somewhere in that hush, a promise held firm: respect doesn't just demand a stage. It begins with a seat at a table and the courage to stay. In a quiet corner of Montgomery, two veterans, Walt Thompson and Marcus Hayes, walked into Millie's diner with nothing more on their minds than sharing breakfast and brotherhood. What they didn't expect was for that routine morning to unravel into a confrontation that would shake a community, go viral, and awaken a national conversation. Their encounter with Deputy Rollins, who approached them not with respect but suspicion, lit a spark that carried far beyond the faded booths and ceramic coffee mugs. Walt and Marcus didn't raise their voices. They didn't cause a scene. They relied on the quiet force of experience, of dignity honed through decades of service and sacrifice. They knew their rights, stood their ground, and refused to be diminished. Their strength was not in shouting louder but in refusing to shrink. And the world listened. The footage filmed by a bystander didn't just expose misconduct. It showed America what composure, pride, and unshakable self-respect looked like. The diner that morning transformed into something more than a local haunt. It became a stage for justice, accountability, and hope. From Lieutenant Carter's public apology to Sheriff Keene's direct response and the community's growing solidarity, this wasn't just about one officer's mistake. It was about how we all choose to respond when prejudice knocks at the door. The most powerful lesson from Walt and Marcus' story isn't just about racial profiling or law enforcement reform. It's about everyday courage, the kind that shows up in the quiet moments when you demand to be seen, when you ask for nothing but the same respect you've given your whole life. It's a reminder that the most powerful protests aren't always loud. Sometimes they're two men sitting calmly, sipping coffee, refusing to be erased. In our lives today, the lesson is clear. Dignity is non-negotiable. Whether you're at a diner, at work, or walking down the street, know your worth and never be afraid to claim your space. And more importantly, when you see injustice, speak up. Even if it's uncomfortable, respect isn't a courtesy. It's a right. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, then please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful real-life stories that matter. Together, we can turn small moments into movements and ensure voices like Walt and Marcus are never silenced again. Thank you for watching.